Nearly missed the landing zone there. I like making things simple. I know if I devoted some mental energy, not thought actually, retroduction specifically, that I could make black holes a whole lot more simple. And I've made quite a few videos on black holes. I made the prediction years ago that it would be discovered that several multiplicatives, and I discovered recently the formulas for that, above that of gamma radiation, would be fundamental matter, i.e. hydrogen. That panned out to be true. That discovery was made like a year and a half ago. I predicted that in video like 2.5 or 3+ years ago. Multiple times. Mother Nature is really simple. A lot of people, metaphysicians and others, have been trying to reconcile light and matter. They knew there fundamentally had to be a connection. Even the people that I don't have any respect for, these atomists and quantum folks, know that there's a grand unified theory. They called it the gut. They've been looking for it. They're trying to unify electrostatics, electricity, magnetism, and so-called gravity for ages. I mean, just ages, trying to unify it. It's already unified. Everything in nature, necessitatively, is, of course, unified. I've done that many times in many different videos, but I'd like to give a quote from Walter Russell. I think, this is actually from one of the, there are these large hand-drawn diagrams that made their way out to me by a source that I won't name. The diagrams have a lot of notes in them, but I think this note is also too in his Universal One or his other book. Trying to simplify black holes, what they are, specifically in other videos priorly, I've said over the years, and it is still accurate, but I want to simplify it a lot more. Is that a black hole? And you have to understand the conjugate nature of the universe, which is, of course, the torus and the hyperboloid. First, we start with the hyperboloid. Hyperboloid, in case you don't know, is the hourglass shape. Yes, this is the specific geometry of increasing in inertia and acceleration. It's also, too, the geometry of so-called gravity. Masses, by the way, do not accelerate towards one another, rather towards the lowest null pressure point between two or more objects. You can actually see this underneath the ferrocell. If you had an object up here and an object down here, they're not accelerating towards one another, they're accelerating towards this null pressure point, i.e. the erasure of the hyperboloid. The negative image of a hyperboloid is a torus, negative image of a torus is the hyperboloid. Specifically, the torus is the geometry of magnetism. The after effect, of course, is something that has no properties, as Nikola Tesla famously said, or somewhat famously said, that being space. So the erasure is the same, of course, as this thing called gravity. Mutual mass acceleration, specifically non-point source acceleration towards the null pressure point between both. Specifically, we have no parallel for it here on this Earth, for obvious reasons. There's a supermass with no magnitude. The only reason why anything has any mass in the universe is due to magnetism and magnetism only, i.e. the volume of any and every atom. You build these up collectively, you end up with a mass. Well, what happens if this particular object becomes so massive and then it attains to a point source singularity? In other words, field incommensurability. Same as on a magnet, of course, i.e. a point source. In this case, dielectricity, or so-called gravity, overthrows magnetism's ability to keep this in the visible universe. Human beings can't wrap their mind around, since there's no parallel here on this Earth at all, the idea of a supermass with no magnitude, but that, of course, is what a black hole is. A black hole is not a hole, and the only reason it's black is because there's a mass there, but it has no magnitude, and light doesn't escape it. Light, of course, is an energy circuit, so calling it a black hole is rather ridiculous. So what if we could actually simplify this thing that human beings call a black hole even more simply, even though I've accurately explained what a black hole is now for a few years? Well, I can make it more simple. Reconciliation of light and matter has been accomplished by me. A few other things, of course, including the world's first explanation as to the nature of magnetism, including my third book, which is free in the description below, Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism. Before making the black hole a lot more simple, first we'll have to ask ourselves a question, something more down to earth. And the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. This is actually the rule of nature. Of course, we have a box. We think a larger box can hold more stuff. But as far as energy is concerned, the higher the capacitance would be accelerating towards this null point here where there's no actual spatial volume. This is, of course, where we end up with a black hole, the center of the hyperboloid, or the hourglass shape here. So we have something supermassive, but no magnitude. Remember, the negative image of a hyperboloid is a torus. The negative image of a torus is a hyperboloid. So the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. You may not have experience with this, but I've actually had many countless emails over the years asking me this question. If you want to understand the nature of a black hole, you would have to ponder to yourself and think about the geometry in your head. Why is it that you have two identical magnets, like a 1-inch cube magnet? One is an N40 Gauss or N45 Gauss, and the other one's basically max Gauss neodymium, which would be an N55. So they're both identical weight. They're both identical geometry, 1-inch cube neodymium. Why is it the more powerful magnet around that more powerful magnet have a smaller spatial field around? People say, I think I got cheated. I bought a more powerful magnet, the same size and geometry as my prior ones, but I have to get something a lot closer to that more powerful magnet to actually feel the effects of the magnetic field flux. And there's a simple explanation for that. The magnetism that's actually ab extra to the magnet would be akin to the puppet. Little kiddies watch a puppet show, they don't really see the strings, and they certainly don't see the people that are actually pulling the strings. A magnet is a conjugate object. It doesn't simply have magnetism around. Sure it does. Magnet's got magnetism around it. Well, yes, it does. But magnetism is the extrinsic attribute of the loss of energy or inertia of the dielectric that makes up that magnet. A more powerful magnet has a smaller spatial field because, being a more powerful magnet, it actually has a more powerful it's kind of obscure to say this, a more powerful hyperboloidal geometry of the dielectric acceleration on that polarized object on the more powerful magnet. It would be like if you increase the pressure, and of course the shower doesn't work this way, if you were to increase the pressure on your shower output, that the drain all of a sudden would start sucking up the water quicker. Of course, no drain in a shower sucks up water. There's no vacuum there. It falls via gravity. But in the case of the magnet, the more powerful you actually create the magnetic field, the less further out from the magnet actually goes, because the suction, if you will, i.e. the acceleration at the bottom there, which would be akin, just like if you actually were to shave the top off of an hourglass, you would pour water in it, it would kind of swirl around the top, flow down to the bottom. Of course, that's taking the analogy too far. In the case of the true field, it would be accelerating and vanishing from this visible universe right here at the center point of the hyperboloid, i.e. the hourglass shape here. So if you can actually wrap your mind around these two things, which are one thing, kind of like ice and water, which are not different things, one is a different modality expression of the other. When you have a more powerful magnet, the magnetic field around it actually shrinks, and people don't think, well, it's more powerful, the magnetic field should be bigger. No, because when people think of a magnet, they only think of magnetism. But they forget, and they don't know actually, that the controlling field modality of a more powerful magnet is the dielectric, which is the conjugate and first principle, the loss of energy of which, of course, is magnetism. That would be saying the loss of heat of water manifests as ice, which of course it does. So people only think magnetism. They don't understand that there's this hyperboloidal geometry which increases when you increase the Gaussian flux of a magnet, a more powerful magnet, N55 for example. If you can understand that, and this is where you can understand where something supermassive attains to complete polarization, point source singularity, such that you have a supermass with no magnitude, and human beings really can't wrap their mind around that. Here's where we get to the part, and I'll wrap this up as quickly as possible. Before doing that, I'd like to give you a quote from Walter Russell. An atom is held together solely by, and I've never ever, by the way, denied nuclear particles in an atom. I have never ever done that, even though oddly sometimes people will accuse me of that. Refutation of atomism is not a refutation of either atoms or nuclear particles. All free neutrons become protons. This is an established fact by every branch of science. This means there's only one fundamental particle. Since all atoms regardless of what they are, compounds of hydrogen. This means there's only one fundamental particle, and that fundamental particle is nothing other than super high energy light. So Walter Russell tells you here what an atom is. It is held together solely by fast motion around a point of rest, which is known as a center of gravity. Nothing else than that. There are no nuclear particles at atom centers. He's actually not denying protons and neutrons. He's saying that these are not, like little BBs inside of the center of an atom. No nuclear particles at the center of atoms. In fact, these are holes, like the eye of a cyclone, in every atom, the 0, 1, 2, 3 groups. But getting to making a black hole even more simple, as I've already explained, over the years, that it's a supermassive with no magnitude, which it is. To explain a black hole more simply is nothing other than a giant hydrogen atom. The event horizon is the boundary of the atom. This, in the case of an atom, would be the radius measured in picometers. This is what we're referring to in the black hole as an event horizon. A black hole, of course, is a point source. Dielectricity has overthrown magnetism's ability to keep that object within the visible universe, but the field of influence is certainly there. Every branch of science has accurately, however they've not fully explained it, even though it's divinely simple, it said every atom is 99.999% empty space. In other words, a super gigantic sphere with something in the center, which they've said of nuclear particles, depending on the atom, protons and neutrons. And they are there, but what are those protons and neutrons? If it is the case, and it is the case, as has been proven now, and I first stated this before it was actually proven, is that all atoms are nothing other than super high energy light. There's no such thing as a photon. That's an arbitrary abstraction, conceptual abstraction, as to the rarefaction and compression of the coaxial circuit that is light. Super high energy light is nothing other than an abstracted conceptual photon that is, and this is where I've been attacked by a few different people. That's because they don't understand what a spherical frequency is. A spherical frequency is where the frequency is so incredibly high, it does not propagate of the medium itself, because light is not an emission, it's a disturbance, and specifically light is a coaxial circuit. We have a spherical frequency, and people don't get that. What do you mean spherical frequency? Super high energy light has a spherical frequency. Of course, no atoms last forever. They certainly last infinitely longer than a human being's life does. So for us human beings, we essentially consider them to last nearly forever, even though, of course, in the sake of the cosmos, they only last in the blink of an eye. Since a black hole is a supermass with no magnitude, dielectricity has overthrown magnetism's ability to keep that in the universe. But how can we make a black hole even more simple, since Mother Nature is a simple, hairy armpit chick with muddy feet and a hemp skirt? We've reconciled light and matter. Matter is super high energy light. All compounded atoms are compounded hydrogen. Well, in other words, they're multiplicatives of hydrogen, whether it be silver or gold or helium or lithium. It's just compounded hydrogen. We know where these atoms are generated as multiplicatives, but what if we could make a black hole even simpler? Supermass with no magnitude, that makes it really simple. Well, a black hole is nothing other than a galactic hydrogen atom. That thing that we call the black hole is no different than the nuclear particle that sits at the center of a hydrogen atom. No different than what Walter Russell said in, this was, he wrote this out in 1951 because of the bottom of the drawing. It even says 1951. Atoms emit light when at capacitance. No different than, by the way, this is, there's different types of uranium glass. This actually has really high uranium, but if you actually take this uranium glass, which I don't like to get it too close to my face, and you bombard it with energy, it will reach capacitance and it will re-emit the light. Let me turn the UV light on here. You can actually see it emitting that nice creepy green glow there. This one actually really makes the Geiger counter scream. Other uranium glass is not that low. This is about a 10,000% higher uranium content on this particular glass. So by bombarding it with high energy light, which is UV lights, the uranium inside there reaches capacitance and emits light. Well, interestingly enough, and you can Google images of this, they're called galactic jets or astrophysical jets. When a black hole reaches capacitance, which is already at capacitance, it continues to take on more and more volume, of course, as we very well know, and not up for debate. But it does emit at its geomagnetic precessional axes. This is called the Lamore frequency or the precessional frequency, same way a gyroscope precesses, emitting out trillions and trillions and trillions of tons of super high energy light, i.e. hydrogen. There are actual images of this in various centers of galaxies and other black holes, but you can see them. They're called astrophysical jets, or they're also too called galactic jets, emitting out trillions and trillions of tons of hydrogen over countless light years. That hydrogen is just super high energy light being emitted by these black holes. These black holes are no different than a galactic hydrogen atom. A hydrogen atom, and this has been proven in nuclear reactors, when you actually bombard it with enough radiation, it will re-emit Cherenkov radiation. Several other elements actually will re-emit Cherenkov radiation, not just hydrogen. You bring it to absolute capacitance, it will re-emit the light. These black holes at their geomagnetic precessional light, since it is a point source object, just like a magnet is, emit super high energy light. And in this case, the super high energy light is hydrogen. This makes explaining black holes as simple as explaining it to a 10-year-old child. A black hole is a supermass with no magnitude because dielectricity has overthrown magnetism's ability to keep it within the visible universe. Black holes, as we can see with countless examples, are emitting out trillions of tons of hydrogen, i.e. super high energy light. And to make a black hole even more simple, it's nothing other than a galactic hydrogen atom. The event horizon is no different than the radius of a hydrogen atom, which is measured in picometers. The region of influence at which this, and it is nature's dynamo. I don't like to use the word generators, since generators don't actually generate energy. They manifest it, but that's also, too, what a black hole does. So these atoms emit light, or in the case of the black hole, when they're at capacitance, such as the UV light in the uranium. Black holes emit the super high energy light at the geomagnetic precessional axis. Look up Lamore frequency for a geomagnetic precession. These galactic jets or astrophysical jets, just like, and ultimately this, we have a state here where light begets light, a collection of a supermass which is just super high energy light. It's so massive and it's attained a point source singularity. It's vanished from this physical universe of Cartesian coordinates, XYZ coordinates. So we have a mass with no magnitude. It acts exactly like a galactic hydrogen atom. It's emitting its own light in the form of hydrogen, which is exactly what hydrogen is. This makes Mother Nature as simple as pie. So simple. Simplicity is divinity. All these people of relativity and quantum, you know, Nikola Tesla said, could think deeply but not clearly. He said you have to be sane to be able to think not only deeply but also too clearly. He actually said they were quite insane. They were deep thinkers but not clear thinkers, i.e. they were nuts. And they are nuts. Well, this makes a black hole not mysterious at all. It's a galactic hydrogen atom, supermassive, no magnitude, it's emitting its own light. And it follows all simplex principles of nature, which is pressure mediation, and the conjugate geometry of the universe, which is the hyperboloid and the torus, in conjugate, kind of like the yin and the yang of the entire universe. This, of course, respectively, is the geometry of force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Force and motion, centrifugal divergence, i.e. magnetism, is toroidal. The inverse of that, i.e. increasing capacitance, because the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. This would be the definition of inertia right here, yeah? Increasing inertia and acceleration, i.e. centripetal convergence. Yeah. Negative image of a torus hyperboloid. Negative image of a hyperboloid, of course, is the torus. Why? My goodness, this makes nature really, really simple. There you have it. This is what a black hole is. Nothing other than a galactic hydrogen atom. It's emitting super high energy light. It is a point source singularity, which even the current scientists actually agree with. And it's a supermass with no magnitude. Because the only thing that keeps anything within the visible universe of mass and magnitude is magnetism. Nothing has volume, a spatial footprint. You know, what's the volume of this? Like 1 inch spherical, yeah? Roughly. That's the only reason anything has any magnet. What happens if you overthrow magnetism with incredible dielectricity on a supermass that has now attained a point source singularity? If you're able to turn up that high energy magnet way infinite multiplicatives above N55 Gauss, which human beings can't do, you know what would happen? It would, not only would the magnetic field continue to shrink, it would vanish from the universe. It'd have, but the region of influence around same would still exist. But physically, in other words with Cartesian value, human beings really can't wrap their mind around this. A region of influence, you have something supermassive, but there's no magnitude there. But you can feel its influence because it acts upon other things, it makes light accelerate towards it. If we could turn a magnet up that high in power, which human beings have no, we'd have to take all the energy in the world to take a 1-inch magnet to the point where it would physically vanish from this universe. Its magnitude would disappear, but its region of influence would still be there. Fascinating and simple, exactly like nature itself. You see, you don't need quantum and you don't need relativity to explain nature. If you do, then you don't understand it. Nature has never been designed to necessitate PhDs to understand simplex pressure mediation. I hope I made that simple. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye. And Happy New Year.